the experiments featured in this program have been described by the scientists who witnessed them as some of the best evidence for life after death ever. After 2 years of intense effort, the skull experiment began to produce more phenomena than in any mediumship experiment in the history of the paranormal.
Their initial claims were that they were in contact with a group of deceased entities who were producing, with their help, a number of pictures of either deceased persons or strips of films, which they claimed to be produced without any cameras and in the dark.
To eliminate any possibility of hoaxing, the scientists brought their own film and locked it in a specially designed security box.
The box was held in the hands of the investigators so that no one could get at it. And then immediately afterwards, we would take it out of the box ourselves so that no one else touched it, and then develop it ourselves in a special machine.
Despite all these precautions, the experiments continued to produce the incredible images seen here.
They were able to achieve whole lengths of film, sometimes up to as much as 4 feet, with various words, symbols, messages, all sorts of different things on that film.
Other films contained poems in centuries-old German and fragments of Greek, Chinese, Hebrew, Latin, and even Sanskrit. The Skull Group were ordinary people with no knowledge of these languages. But did these films have a purpose? If dead personalities were producing these images, why did they apparently design some of them as complex puzzles?
Providing something which is a puzzle, which is difficult to solve, is simply because it is difficult to solve. It isn't readily available. It can't be easily attributable to the person sitting round the table.
Despite lengthy investigations, the possible authors of some of the films, like this German poem, proved impossible to trace. But others were easier to track down. This one contains a poem by Frederick Myers. Intriguingly, Myers was one of the founders of the SPR and a passionate researcher into the evidence for life after death. Before he died in 1901, he promised his colleagues at the SPR that he would try to communicate with them from the other side. Could this film actually represent evidence of the afterlife sent by one of its greatest investigators? Mostly the researchers were unclear as to who might have created these films. However, there were clues as to who the ghostly authors might be in the form of initials or signatures. For example, in this film, the signature appears to belong to the dead singer and actor Ivor Novello. This was received on one of the Skull films. Compare it to Novello's actual signature. Investigators say these images were created in total darkness. But how?
I think that those pictures can be explained only by imagining that the spirits can project their recollections and images onto a film in some way we can't begin to understand. The only alternative explanation is they are all fakes, and I don't believe that there's evidence that that is the case.
Although the mechanism for their creation remains a mystery, investigators concluded they were unique.
As far as the photographic evidence is concerned at Skull, the strips of film, there has, in my view, never been anything like that at all, ever.
Spurred on by the photographic experiments, the Skull Group began a series of video experiments called Project Alice, after Alice through the looking glass. Their ambition was nothing less than to try and capture moving images sent from the spirit world. The Skull Group insists that instructions on how to position the camera and mirrors came from their spirit communicators. They were told to set up a video camera in the dark cellar, aim it at a pair of mirrors so that it could only film its own viewfinder. While it was recording, nothing unusual was seen. But when the tape was played back, these remarkable pictures appeared.
We had images on the video, sometimes of what looked like a tunnel of light. Other times spirit faces were coming towards us. Sometimes what appeared to be a doorway moving.
Skeptics claim these images were created by video feedback, occurring when a camera records its own output. But scientists have ruled this out. Video feedback doesn't produce this kind of result. As to what these extraordinary pictures represent, we can only guess, since their meaning was never explained to the Skull Group. This video, also totally unexplained, appears to be a ghostly face with moving eyes. Later, a few video experiments were attempted in full light. Again, nothing unusual was seen during the recording. However, on playback, this unworldly figure appeared. But was it possible for the Skull Group to have faked these images? Not according to the investigator who monitored these experiments, Swiss lawyer and businessman Dr. Hans Scher.
There's absolutely no possibility that this film could have been prepared before, because I selected one of the video films which was in its original packaging, which I opened. I took the film out, I signed the film, and I put it personally in the video camera.
He inserted it into the camera. We never touched at any stage the camera or the film.
When we played the film, it showed at the beginning a number of bubbles of various colors.
But there was one particular bubble on there in which the face of a person appeared, and it was a man with spectacles.
Although Dr. Scher did not recognize this face, the Skull Group thought it might have belonged to someone who was trying to communicate with him from the afterlife. Attempting to capture spirit voices via technical devices like radios and tape recorders has a long tradition that goes back to the last century. Today, there are tens of thousands of people around the world who say they have captured the voices of the dead on simple tape recorders. This is known as the electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, and was recently popularized in the Hollywood blockbuster White Noise. Despite the Hollywood treatment, EVP has been the focus of serious scientific investigation. One of the leading researchers is Alexander McCrae, an electronics engineer who has worked on communication systems for the space shuttle. He has been investigating EVP for decades.
If somebody came up to me in the street and said, there's nothing paranormal about EVP, I would say, well, I've done at least 20 years and hundreds of experiments, and I know that it is a paranormal effect. Now, how many experiments have you done?
But skeptics insist that EVP is nothing more than the random pickup of broadcast signals like radio and TV. To test this theory, McCrae tried to obtain EVP inside a laboratory that was fully shielded against radio and sound waves. This meant it was impossible to pick up any stray broadcast signals.
So inside the laboratory you couldn't pick up anything, but yet the device still produced voices.
Although this audio sample is hard to understand, the very fact it was recorded defies all known laws of science. One experimenter of EVP is Vicky Talbot, who lost her son Braden in a boating accident in 2001.
Okay, I'm coming down into Wildcat Cove right now, which is the cove that my son departed from and did not return.
Ever since then, she says she can record and recognize his voice using this digital recorder.
Well, that's Braden. What has really convinced me is the way he speaks, the stress, the intonation. Sometimes he sounds exactly as he did in life.
Happy New Year.
He will use certain phrases that we used to use. He will say certain things that will identify himself as the person that he was in life. I am convinced, personally, that I am communicating with my son.
Like visitors to Skoll and to Bachi's Centre, EVP practitioners find comfort in the belief that they can still communicate with loved ones. But even this conviction can't make up for the unbearable burden of losing a child.
These just make me want to cry, just looking at him. He'll just never be this age again, or do that again. What matters is the love that you have for your family. That's what really matters, and not to screw it up, and to remember they can be gone in a flash. You know, these other people, I feel so sorry for them because they have no way of communicating with those that they have lost. And they go around thinking, if only, if only, if only. I don't have to think that. And that's a good thing.
Although EVP provides some comfort to the bereaved, practitioners say that the voices are often unclear, always one way, and frustratingly short.
One way that we also communicated with spirit, and which was a very effective way, was by use of an ordinary, very cheap tape recorder whose amplifiers were used by the spirit team to carry on a two-way conversation with us.
We inspected this machine and found it was completely normal. Earlier, its built-in microphone had been removed to eliminate the possibility of recording anything. When the machine, which contained a blank cassette, was activated, witnesses were astonished when they heard this voice asking them a question.
Yes.
Yes, Skoll Experimental Group. Experimenting with audio.
Yes.
Historic moment it is.
The Skoll Group say that their spirit communicators suggested ways of improving their experiments. For example, they told Professor Ellison, one of the SPR scientists, how to build a device for boosting communications via the tape recorder. But this information arrived in a very strange way. These images appeared after an unexposed film locked in the security box was later processed by the scientists. The scientists speculated about who was providing this technical information. Then initials at the end of the film seemed to have solved this mystery.
I wrote to the Edison Memorial people in America, and they sent me a copy of one of his letters, which contained his initials, which looked almost identical to the signature on this film.
This matching set of initials convinced the researchers it was Thomas Edison providing this information. Not only was Edison the world's most famous inventor, he also had an enormous interest in the possibility of an afterlife. His intention to build a machine that could communicate with the dead made headlines around the world, but he died before being able to build it. Is it possible that through the Skoll Group, he finally achieved this aim?
The man later says, "How long have you fellas been involved with sorcery?" And he chopped us a little bit, and I said, "Exactly what do you mean?" "Well," he said, "you know, what you people are doing, talking to the supposed spirits of the dead." He says, this is silly."
And this man had been at the seance with you.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And he's telling you that it's silly what you've
Yeah.
just done. Because they believe that the soul is immortal.
Yeah.
They may not be talking to the supposed spirits of the dead.
Oh, yeah. Contrary to popular belief, necromancy does not consist of conjuring the spirits of the dead. The reason being, that man is totally mortal and does not possess an immortal soul. So, who are they talking to? He says, the friendly demon spirits that have always found over the centuries great delight in impersonating in apparitions departed loved ones and persons of great renown.